Every single day, millions of people step outside believing they are doing one of the healthiest things possible for their bodies. They walk through parks, around neighborhoods, on treadmills, through shopping centers, convinced that movement alone is enough to protect them from aging. And yet, many of those same people eventually end up with chronic knee pain, stiffness in their hips, numbness in their legs, aching lower backs, and a growing sense that their body is somehow getting worse instead of better. After years of medical practice, one question repeatedly exposes the real problem. How exactly are you walking? Because in many cases, the issue is not that people walk too little, it is that they walk incorrectly. And wrong walking is not merely ineffective. Over time, it can overload joints, accelerate cartilage damage, worsen posture, strain the cardiovascular system, and fuel chronic inflammation throughout the body. The danger becomes especially serious after the age of 50, when the body's natural resilience begins declining in measurable ways. This is where modern physiology changes the conversation completely. After 50, the human body enters a predictable cascade of biological changes. These changes are not random. They are documented, measurable, and deeply connected to mobility and long-term health. The first major shift is sarcopenia, the gradual loss of muscle mass that accelerates with aging. After 50, adults can lose roughly 1 to 2% of total muscle tissue every year. At first, that decline feels invisible, but over a decade, the body may lose 15 to 20% of its stabilizing muscular support system. And muscle is not just about strength. Muscle protects joints. Muscle helps regulate blood sugar. Muscle maintains posture. Muscle controls balance and movement efficiency. As muscle disappears, everything downstream begins destabilizing. Then the joints begin changing. Cartilage, the smooth tissue cushioning the ends of bones, has no direct blood supply. It depends entirely on movement for nourishment. Every step compresses the joint slightly, allowing synovial fluid to deliver nutrients into the cartilage surface. Without regular movement, cartilage slowly starves. It dries, thins, loses elasticity. Eventually, it begins breaking down into osteoarthritis. This is why walking can become either protective medicine or destructive stress depending on how it is performed. Then metabolism changes. After 50, basal metabolic rate gradually declines. The body burns fewer calories at rest than it once did decades earlier. The exact same lifestyle that maintained stable weight at 30 can quietly lead to fat accumulation by 55 even without major dietary changes. And circulation weakens too. Blood vessels lose elasticity. Peripheral circulation becomes less efficient. Many adults begin noticing cold feet, nighttime leg cramps, heaviness in the lower legs, or fatigue after ordinary daily activity. Walking, when done correctly, improves every one of these systems simultaneously. It stimulates muscle activation, feeds cartilage through movement, improves blood flow, supports metabolism, reduces cardiovascular risk. Research consistently links regular walking to lower rates of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, and cognitive decline. But there is a dangerous detail many people never hear. All of those benefits depend heavily on technique. Wrong walking patterns can produce the opposite effect. And among all the mistakes doctors repeatedly observe, one of the most damaging often happens within the very first minute of the walk itself. People start too fast. One of the most common mistakes people make while walking is also one of the most dangerous. They begin too aggressively. The moment they step outside, they immediately accelerate into full pace as if the body should instantly perform at maximum efficiency without preparation. On the surface, this seems harmless. Many people even believe it is productive. Why waste time walking slowly when the goal is exercise? But the human body does not function like a machine turning on with a switch. It requires transition, and after 50, that transition becomes critically important. When walking begins too fast, several systems inside the body are suddenly forced into stress mode before they are ready. Muscles are still cold. Joint lubrication has not fully distributed. Blood vessels have not adapted to increased demand. Heart rate rises abruptly. Blood pressure spikes more sharply than necessary. Over time, these repeated stress patterns accumulate damage. Cold muscles are less elastic, meaning they are more vulnerable to microscopic tearing. Individually, these micro tears may seem insignificant, but repeated thousands of times over months and years, they contribute to chronic pain syndromes, stiffness, and inflammation many people mistakenly blame on aging itself. The joints suffer too. During rest, synovial fluid settles unevenly inside the joint spaces. Slow movement is required to distribute that lubricating fluid evenly across cartilage surfaces. Without that gradual warm-up, cartilage absorbs impact before proper protection is established. In simple terms, people begin their walks with their joints effectively running dry. Then comes the cardiovascular strain. The aging heart and blood vessels do not respond well to sudden spikes in workload. After 50, arterial elasticity naturally decreases. Sudden acceleration forces blood pressure upward rapidly, increasing unnecessary stress against vessel walls already weakened by time, inflammation, or plaque buildup. And perhaps the most frustrating part is how easily this entire problem can be prevented. The solution requires no expensive equipment, no medication, and no extra hour in the gym. Only patience. Doctors increasingly recommend that the first 3 to 5 minutes of every walk should feel intentionally slow, almost leisurely. This warm-up period allows muscles to heat gradually, joints to lubricate properly, circulation to adapt, and the cardiovascular system to settle into a stable working rhythm. Only then should pace increase. But even when people avoid the fast start mistake, another silent problem often continues damaging the body with every step. Posture. Walk through any public park and watch carefully. Most people move with their head pushed forward, shoulders collapsed inward, eyes pointed toward the ground or a phone screen. It appears harmless because modern posture dysfunction has become normalized. Biomechanically, however, it is disastrous. The human head weighs roughly 11 pounds when positioned correctly above the spine. But the moment the head shifts forward by even 1 or 2 inches, the load placed on the neck and upper back muscles multiplies dramatically. Suddenly, those muscles may be supporting 40 to 50 pounds of equivalent strain continuously during the walk. This creates chronic tension in the neck, shoulders, and upper spine. Many people return home believing they have bad necks or arthritis when in reality they spent 30 minutes forcing their cervical spine into a mechanically unstable position. And posture affects far more than pain. It directly changes breathing. When shoulders collapse forward and the chest compresses, the diaphragm cannot descend properly. Lung expansion becomes restricted. Breathing becomes shallow and inefficient. Oxygen delivery falls. Energy drops faster. Fatigue arrives earlier. People often interpret this exhaustion as proof they are aging poorly. But in many cases, the real culprit is not age. It is mechanics. Poor posture also disrupts the entire movement chain through the body. Head-forward posture changes spinal alignment. The pelvis tilts incorrectly. Knees absorb pressure at improper angles. Hips compensate abnormally. One small posture error begins cascading through the entire body. And over thousands of steps, the damage quietly accumulates. If posture determines how force moves through the body, shoes determine how force enters it in the first place. And yet footwear remains one of the most ignored health decisions people make after 50. Most individuals spend more time researching a phone than examining the condition of the shoes carrying their body weight thousands of times every day. But according to orthopedic specialists and rehabilitation experts, poor footwear may quietly accelerate knee degeneration, hip pain, spinal stress, and balance problems faster than people realize. Because aging changes the feet themselves. Over time, the fat pads under the soles gradually thin out. These pads once acted like built-in shock absorbers, cushioning every step against hard surfaces. As they diminish, the body loses part of its natural protection system. Suddenly, impact forces travel upward more aggressively through the ankles, knees, hips, and lower spine. Then the muscles and ligaments supporting the arch begin weakening. The arch slowly collapses inward, a process many people never notice until pain develops elsewhere. But the collapse changes alignment throughout the entire kinetic chain. Knees begin rotating improperly, hip mechanics shift, lower back stress increases, and when worn out or unsupportive shoes are added into that equation, the damage compounds further. This is why specialists emphasize 3 critical features in walking footwear after 50. First, cushioning. The heel and forefoot require enough shock absorption to reduce repeated impact stress without becoming unstable or excessively soft. Second, arch support. Not rigid correction, but support following the natural structure of the foot to reduce inward collapse during walking. Third, flexibility. The front of the shoe must bend naturally where the foot bends. If the sole is too rigid, the walking pattern becomes unnatural, overloading calf muscles and the Achilles tendon repeatedly. But perhaps the most overlooked detail of all is shoe lifespan. Many people continue using walking shoes for years simply because the outside still looks fine. What they do not realize is that the midsole cushioning inside the shoe deteriorates long before visible damage appears externally. The shoe may still appear new while its shock absorption has already failed. For regular walkers, replacing walking shoes approximately once per year is not marketing hype. It is long-term joint preservation. Then comes another mistake deeply embedded in modern lifestyles: the weekend warrior pattern. People remain sedentary all week, then suddenly attempt one massive walk on Saturday or Sunday believing they are compensating for inactivity. 1 hour, sometimes 2. They return exhausted but satisfied emotionally, convinced they completed their weekly health requirement. Physiologically, however, the body does not respond best to isolated bursts of movement. It responds to consistency. Every walk sends signals into the cardiovascular system, muscles, metabolism, and nervous system. Repeated signals create adaptation. Blood vessels improve efficiency, muscles strengthen, circulation stabilizes, metabolism becomes more responsive. But 1 walk per week is too inconsistent for meaningful adaptation. Worse, a long intense walk after days of inactivity becomes a stress event for tissues that are unprepared. Muscles stiffen, joints ache, recovery becomes painful. Then people conclude walking is harming them. The truth is usually different. The loading pattern was wrong. Modern exercise physiology consistently supports moderate walking performed most days of the week over occasional extreme sessions. 20 to 30 minutes 5 or 6 days weekly creates far greater long-term cardiovascular and metabolic benefits than one exhausting weekend effort. The body adapts only to what repeats consistently. And surprisingly, another important part of that adaptation depends on something many walkers barely think about at all: their arms. Most people either lock their arms stiffly beside them, place their hands inside pockets, or barely move their upper body while walking. Biomechanically, this disrupts the body's natural coordination system completely. Human walking was never designed as a legs-only movement. It is a full-body neurological pattern built on coordination between opposite sides of the body. When the left leg moves forward, the right arm naturally swings forward as well. This cross-pattern movement stabilizes the spine, distributes force evenly, and helps maintain balance automatically. But many people unknowingly interrupt that system. They walk with stiff arms, hands buried in pockets, phones gripped tightly, upper body frozen. At first glance, this seems insignificant. In reality, it forces the lower back to compensate for lost rotational balance during every step. Over thousands of repetitions, the lumbar spine absorbs stress it was never meant to handle alone. For people already struggling with lower back discomfort, this becomes especially destructive. Proper arm swing does something else equally important. It activates more muscle tissue. The shoulders, upper back, chest, and trunk all begin participating naturally in movement. More active muscle means improved circulation, higher caloric expenditure, stronger coordination. and more efficient metabolic stimulation during the exact same walk. This is why two people can walk the same distance yet receive dramatically different physical benefits depending on movement mechanics alone. Arm swing also stabilizes rhythm, and rhythm becomes increasingly important with aging because coordination gradually declines over time. A natural, relaxed arm motion helps maintain stride consistency and lowers the risk of imbalance or stumbling. The correction itself is surprisingly simple. Elbows slightly bent, shoulders relaxed, arms swinging naturally opposite the legs. Not exaggerated, not forced, just allowing the body to move the way it was biologically designed to move. But perhaps the most modern walking mistake of all is something almost nobody dealt with 20 years ago. Walking while staring at a phone. Today, people step outside claiming they are exercising while simultaneously scrolling through messages, social media feeds, videos, or news updates, biomechanically and neurologically. This may completely undermine many of the very benefits walking is supposed to provide. The posture damage alone is severe. The moment someone looks downward toward a screen, the head tilts forward sharply. We already know what that does to spinal loading. Neck strain multiplies, shoulders collapse inward, chest expansion decreases, breathing becomes shallow. But now there is another danger layered on top. Balance impairment. After 50, the vestibular system inside the inner ear becomes less precise. Proprioception, the body's internal awareness of position and movement, also gradually weakens. This is a normal part of aging. As these systems decline, the brain relies increasingly on visual information to maintain safe balance during walking. When the eyes remain locked onto a screen instead of the surrounding environment, critical spatial awareness disappears. Uneven pavement, curbs, slippery surfaces, stairs, potholes, sudden drops, all become easier to miss. And after 50, falls become far more serious than most people realize. A simple fall may mean fractured wrists, broken ribs, or hip fractures requiring surgery and months of rehabilitation. In older adults, loss of mobility after major falls can permanently alter independence and quality of life. The prevention is almost embarrassingly simple. Put the phone away. If audio is needed, use earbuds. Listen to music or podcasts without constantly staring downward at a screen. Because walking is not only physical exercise, it is neurological training. When people walk attentively, paying attention to breathing, movement, posture, surroundings, and balance, the brain itself becomes more engaged. Coordination improves, spatial awareness sharpens, attention systems remain active. But there is still one final mistake many people underestimate completely: recovery. Most individuals assume walking is so gentle that no recovery process matters afterward at all. Physiologically, that assumption is completely wrong. One of the biggest myths surrounding walking is the belief that because it feels gentle, the body does not require recovery afterward. But the human body does not distinguish recovery needs based on whether an activity feels intense emotionally. It responds to mechanical load, muscle contraction, fluid balance, and cumulative stress inside tissues. And after 50, recovery becomes one of the most important factors separating healthy movement from chronic pain. The first issue is hydration. Muscle tissue consists of roughly 70% water. Every contraction, relaxation, repair process, and metabolic reaction inside muscle fibers depends on adequate fluid availability. Even mild dehydration can reduce muscle elasticity, impair circulation, slow tissue recovery, and increase the risk of cramping or stiffness. Many people finish a walk slightly dehydrated without realizing it, especially during warmer weather or longer sessions. Then they wake up the next day feeling unusually tight or fatigued and assume aging is to blame. Often, it is simply physiology. A single glass of water after walking may sound trivial, yet it directly supports circulation, recovery, and muscle function. Then comes stretching. Walking repeatedly shortens certain muscle groups through constant contraction patterns. Without gentle stretching afterward, those muscles remain slightly tightened. Day after day, that tension accumulates. Calves tighten, hamstrings stiffen, lower back mobility decreases, joint range of motion narrows gradually. People describe this as getting old, when in many cases the body is simply adapting to repetitive movement without proper release afterward. Just 5 minutes of gentle stretching after walking can dramatically reduce this progression. Not aggressive stretching, not painful forcing, simple restoration of normal movement length. And then there is another issue modern culture constantly misunderstands: rest days. Many people assume that if walking is healthy, more walking must automatically be healthier. But biological adaptation does not occur during exercise itself. It occurs during recovery. That is when muscles repair microscopic stress, blood vessels strengthen, connective tissues remodel, the nervous system stabilizes movement patterns. Without adequate recovery time, adaptation becomes incomplete and inflammation begins accumulating faster than healing. This is why 1 or 2 rest days each week are not signs of weakness. They are part of the system itself. Movement, hydration, stretching, recovery. Together, these elements create sustainable long-term mobility instead of short bursts of motivation followed by injury and burnout.